Michael.
Thank you very much. I will stand up because I'm used to standing up in the place where I work. And the one thing I think I can be fairly confident is you will certainly be more polite here than in the place where I work. Let's start on a happy note. Just about everything is going wrong with current energy policy. The government is still hell for leather for the fossil fuel industry. Cameron has just announced, you may have seen, 200 billion pound contract for further exploration in the North Sea for oil and gas. We have had a clear statement that the government is still fanatically concerned, despite everything Stephen said, with going ahead with nuclear, Hinkley Point C, even though it's clearly uneconomic and clearly intended, I think, probably deliberately, to crowd out renewables. The crackpot right, which you, I must say, more crackpot than you ever realised if you sat in the House of Commons, want to end all onshore wind power. Not only no more, but if they had their way, to begin to pull down the turbines. The government, as we all know, has just stood by with arms folded while the big six have crucified consumers by sky-high prices. And despite all of the green rhetoric, I mean, I will throw up the next time I hear this is the greenest government ever. The fact is, this government has just given up, abandoned the fight against climate change. Patterson, you've probably never heard of, I can see one or two nods, is the Secretary of State. I hope, pray not for much longer, but he is a climate change denier. And now, of course, we have Osborne, who is completely starry-eyed about fracking. A lot has been said about that, and I'll say a little. The overriding issue is clearly climate change. And you have to ask the question, why has so little been done when 99% of the world's scientists all agree that the safe 2% increase in global temperatures is almost certain, and I think you can say certain, to be exceeded by the end of this century, not by a little, but it is the most likely context, the most likely result is probably a 4% increase in global temperatures by the end of this century. And what that means, it may not seem very much, but that what the undoubted consequence of that, looking at the history of this planet, is that large parts of this planet will actually become uninhabitable for the human race. Now, the answer to that question, of course, lies in the political lobbying power of the oil, gas and coal industry, and I would say also the political economic rivalry between US and China. But the fact is, climate doesn't wait for any man, even if he is the President of the United States or the Premier of China. What is not realised, it's not just a gradual, steady, linear increase in global temperatures. There is a very real risk of sudden, abrupt tipping points as this temperature rises, which will produce an enormous surge and quite likely flip the entire planet into a new equilibrium, which again will be extremely hostile to human occupation. Let me just give 4 quick examples. One is the deforestation of the Amazon, which is already well underway, which is the world's greatest rainforest, absorbing CO2, and by 2050, all the scientists agree, will become a desert and will actually be pumping out CO2. Siberian permafrost, in that huge, colossal area of Russia, the biggest country in the world, is melting. And when it does melt, and we've heard a lot about methane, the methane, billions of tons of methane are likely to be released, which, as we've heard, is something of the order of 30 times more toxic than CO2. The warming of the oceans, again, well underway. will eventually, it isn't going to happen quickly, but will eventually release the methane hydrates on the ocean floor, which again, we're talking about billions of tons of methane. And of course, again, this is well underway. We've seen many pictures of it. The melting of the Antarctic and the Greenland ice caps is certainly going to increase sea levels. Eventually, again, it may not happen in our lives, even of the veterans, but it is certainly going to happen in the lives of our children and certainly our great-grandchildren. And that could raise sea levels by 20 to 25 feet. And most of the world's cities are, of course, on the coast or on major rivers. So what should be done? Well, I think the answer is extremely clear. The fossil fuels industry, or the fossil fuels themselves, have gradually got to be phased out. I'd say steadily phased out. And what that means is that most of the coal, and this is something which is so heretical, it's only when I'm in the safety of Sussex LRC that I can say this, but it actually means leaving, I believe this passionately, it means leaving most of the remaining oil, coal and gas in the ground. And instead, it means a huge development of renewables, massively to accelerate the development of wind power, solar power, wave and tidal power, and as Stephen has said, very, very importantly, something we tend to rather easily forget, the importance of greater energy efficiency and less energy waste. Now, as it happens, this is something that we could perfectly well do. We're not talking about something utopian. Britain, as an island off Europe, is sitting on probably the biggest repository in the Western world in terms of renewables. Certainly a very high proportion of the rest of Europe put together. Luckily, because of our island position and the wind and the tidal waves, I won't say so much about the sun, but it is a tremendous opportunity for us. Nevertheless, what is really staggering, that as a proportion of the consumption of final energy, Sweden gets 41% of that energy from renewables, Finland gets about 28%, France gets 10%, Germany gets 6%, and what about us? With all the endowments of renewables that we've got, 1.5%. So the opportunities for an enormous renewables revolution is manifestly available. And indeed, the British Wind Energy Association believes, and I think Brenda referred to this, that 27% of electricity in this country could easily be generated by renewables by 2020. But at present, again, as Stephen said, what the policy, in my view, I mean, I'm speaking a lot against Labour policy because I don't think it's anything like radical enough, but what the conventional view, I sometimes think the civil service view, of course, driving all of this, is that we need a combination of nuclear, carbon capture and storage, and renewables. Now, again, as Stephen said, carbon capture and storage is really, there is no prototype in the world, including in America, which exists at the present time. And it really is a fantasy. If you look at nuclear, the cost of this country, not with new nuclear, but with the management of waste and decommissioning is now £75 billion. Not all this year, of course, this is over a long period of time, but that is about 5% of our entire GDP. Nuclear has never been competitive without huge public subsidy. There are only 2 nuclear plants being built at the present in the world, one in Finland and one in France. Both are twice over budget already, and both are 3 times behind schedule. There is no safe long-term confinement of nuclear waste anywhere in the world, which is a very, very important point. When you think of the thousands of tons which exist everywhere, it is crazy to start further nuclear development before we know how to deal with the waste safely. And of course, although this tends to be played down, the risk of a nuclear accident is very, very small. but it is not negligible. So I think CCS, carbon capture and storage, and nuclear are really not practicable options. And the only opportunity, and one which is this Britain has all the opportunities for it, is the development of renewables at a far faster rate. Now, none of this, of course, is going to happen unless the government regains control of a privatised energy market. The big six control 99% of that retail market. They're far too powerful and they abuse their power very patently. They've massively increased, and this always happens in private markets, it's not just in energy, massively increased management salaries and bonuses and everything else, share options, and of course dividends, and at the same time made that money by squeezing consumers in terms of high prices. They've distorted competition by making the relationship between the prices at which they buy, the wholesale prices, and the prices at which they sell extremely opaque, even for the generator Ofgem, who's had 18 studies in the last 20 years, very ineffectively. And frankly, they have failed Britain because they have not invested in Britain's energy future on anything like the scale which is needed. That's why we keep hearing about talk about the lights going out. Now, that requires, I think, and there's no alternative to this, I don't think you can regulate a private energy market effectively. I'm not against tighter regulation, I think we need it, but I think that has to centre around taking back Centrica, which was the old British Gas, into public ownership, and probably some of the other five as well, in order to ensure that the national interest, this is a national security issue. It's not a minor issue. The national security of this country can be guaranteed against the profit maximisation of these semi-monopolistic private oligarchs, as it seems to me. It also, of course, requires, and I needn't say very much about this because this is really the centre of the discussion, calling a halt to fracking. And there are very, very powerful reasons for this. There is abundant evidence from both the United States and from France about serious environmental and health standards, in disastrous gas leaks, in land contamination, and in polluted water. And this is very important. It's not just the softies on the left who are concerned about the impact on people, although we rightly are, but it is also true that the United States, yes, there has been a huge surge in production as a result of fracking for shale gas, but it is equally, we're now seeing, a very rapid fall. In other words, it's extremely short term and very significant that actually many investors are now actually pulling out. And of course, famously, after the former Tory minister said, you know what's coming, all the shale gas is unfortunately in the wrong place. It's in the middle class south and east, and not in the desolate working class north. I don't think he'd ever actually been north of Watford. Well, I know the north of the country extremely well, and of course 1/5 live in and around London, but 4/5 do not. So I think that is something that the Tories actually need to face up to. There's going to be resistance everywhere to fracking. And I've been very pleased to hear in the discussions before this meeting actually started about the network which has already been put into place to make this effective. This could be a very, very significant social movement. So I conclude by saying this, that Britain now needs, I think, a full-hearted focus on renewables. We have never had that from any previous government so far, including Labour. And together with a massive improvement in energy efficiency and a real crackdown on energy waste. And I have to say that is spelled out in my book. I'm going to end with a commercial plug. There are, just let me say this, a few other copies at the back, all of which have been signed, and I'm selling it at half price. So all of this has been worth it. No. What I'm really concerned about is getting the ideas across about an alternative strategy and alternative vision to the last 20, 30 years of neoliberal capitalism. That's what I'm really concerned about, that energy is a major part of that. And we need a green Labour government with the determination, the motivation, the drive and the vision to deliver it. All power to your elbow.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Michael, for